Jordan Love, not a top 10 quarterback? Pro Football Focus analyst Trevor Sikkema joins us on the show today to talk about that, the Packers draft, their offseason, and a lot more.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus comes on the show today. He just dropped a piece where he ranked the quarterbacks coming into this season, and he did not have Mr. Jordan Love in his top 10. I put his feet to the fire on that one, but it was a lot more that we got into. The draft, some of the players he liked, some of the situations that he maybe didn't love, and what he thinks of this team, where they stand now in the NFC. Let's get into it. Joining me now, back again, our old pal Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus, co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange, which is, I have to say, one of the best shows out there. If you are a football sicko, and I know that Locked On Packers listeners are, in fact, football sickos. And Trevor, we have to start here because you had a list, and anytime you have a list, people are going to be mad about the list. You ranked the quarterbacks. You had Jordan Love 11th. I think if you're a Packers fan, you're going, why is Jordan Love behind Jalen Hurts? Why is Jordan Love behind CJ Stroud? Although I think that one's pretty close. So putting that part of it aside, why did you have Love where he is?
Honestly, look, I love Packers fans to death. I mean, like, they're going to defend their guy, but 11's a compliment, man. I mean, like, I look at the quarterbacks that he has jumped already in just a phenomenal season that he had this past year, which was the first where we really got to look at him as a full-time starter. And at the beginning of the year, I'm looking at Love's numbers. I'm doing a lot of different deep dives on all these quarterbacks. And yeah, I mean, Love struggled in the early parts of the year, right? Especially with accuracy. I mean, the PFF grades reflect that. I mean, his overall adjusted completion percentage on the year still wasn't great. Yeah. But a big reason for that was because of those first, I think it was 7 or 8 weeks of the season where he was really up and down. You could tell he was still trying to gain his confidence. But man, that second half of the season, like I remember kind of going through this list initially, and I figured I would have Love top half because I ranked the 32 starting NFL quarterbacks, and a couple of them, if we get further down the list, it's like, oh, like this guy or this guy, like Denver situation or New England situation. But it's a ranking of 32.
You never want to be in those spots on the list.
No, you don't. I mean, you're going to be pretty low on the list if there's a slash in between two names. So, I figured that I would have Love in the top half, but I wasn't sure how much past like 16 I would have him. And I think initially I kind of was just like, okay, like I'm going to put him in this bucket here. And he's at the very beginning of tier 4 for me. And that is at number 11, right outside of the top 10. And I mean, technically it would be tier 3, but I put Mahomes in a tier of his own because
earned. I think that's fair. Yeah. The Mahomes tier, and then everybody else starts out.
Right. And that's where the list started. The tier is literally called the Mahomes. It's just one guy. It's just Patrick Mahomes. But when I looked at Love, I was so blown away with actually just diving into the numbers of how good this guy was in the second half of the season. Yeah. And it forced me to say, okay, even though it was sort of a tale of two seasons here, the way he ended the year, you have to say to yourself, if that's the Jordan Love we get out of the gate in 2024, I mean, this is without question a potential playoff caliber quarterback, somebody who deserves to be in the conversation right around the fringe top 10, because you're a fringe top 10 quarterback. There's a lot of really good quarterback play going around the NFL right now. It's not just like a couple of guys at the top and that's it. Like this list is pretty deep. So for him to even be at 11, to me, it's much less of a couple of guys who might be in front of him, who we might get to in a second. But the fact that he was all the way at number 11 for me more spoke to the compliment and the respect that he earned throughout the second half of the season with just some unbelievable performances, some really great data points for him.
Yeah, post-draft, I was able to go back and look at the numbers, and I wanted to see that second half. Did anyone put, and everydayers have heard this, but did anyone put together an 8-week stretch like Jordan Love did? How many guys have put together a stretch like that? Just pure productivity, not the advanced numbers. I get that, like, that would probably be better, but just touchdowns to interceptions. In their first year as starter, only 2 other guys have done what he did in their first year as a starter over any 8-game stretch: Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. That's it. That's the whole list. So
not bad.
Yeah, pretty good company to be in for those 2 guys. Understanding, okay, we only saw him for the year. That sets this expectation now moving forward. What for you would you want to see him improve on, or maybe continue from the second half, that would make you go, okay, this guy's a top 10, top 8 kind of quarterback? Because to me, when we watch that second half, especially, you go, this guy could be one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Like, take Patrick Mahomes out of it for a second. Like, he can be in that next tier if he is that guy consistently.
Well, he has the arm talent, I think, to ascend into that like elite tier that I have right in front of him within that top 10. He absolutely does. The thing that I want to see more from him is sort of kind of well, I guess it's one of 2 things, right? Because there's another player on this list who's much further down from where Jordan Love is, and it's Geno Smith, who I really like Geno Smith, but when you look at Geno Smith, it's hard to look at the good that he has had over the last 2 years without also looking at the bad. When I talked about how Love is sort of a tale of 2 different seasons in 2023, if you look at the last 2 years of Geno Smith in Seattle, it's like quarters, right? The first half of 2022, incredible.
Yeah.
But the back half of 2022, okay, he led the NFL in turnover-worthy plays in the second half of the season. He started off 2023 really quiet, but then in the second half of 2023, boom, he looked like the Geno Smith that was making headlines at the beginning of 2022. So it's just this stretches of variance that I don't want to see with Love. And look, quarterback in the NFL is a tough job. There's always going to be ups and downs, but what will really allow him to ascend into that, okay, this is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, we're not really having a debate about it, is do you not have those long stretches of not being the guy, like the guy that we saw at the tail end of 2023? And I think what holds the key to that is just overall accuracy. And again, I was so impressed with what he was able to do in the second half of the season. He had so much confidence in how he was throwing and where he was throwing to and where he was looking. But yeah, he's got a really big, powerful arm. That arm talent gives him that ceiling of a top 10 quarterback. But there are times when he's just trying to put too much mustard on the ball and it's just flying on him a little bit. The true ball placement isn't there. That's what I really want to see him hone in on in 2024, is get a little bit better at those touch passes, right? When it's, you don't have to throw the ball a million miles an hour every single time. You could take a little bit off of it, time it up a little bit better. And your accuracy scores, I think, are really going to take a jump up, maybe into the mid and high 70s for the adjusted completion percentage, like we're really trying to see from him. So to me, that's what kind of holds him. That's what's kind of holding him from being without question in that top 10 right now, is let's see it for a little bit longer of a stretch of time. Because if I learned anything at PFF, it is the more data you have, the more clear the picture. Volume is very, very important when you're judging what is true and what is not. So a continued success from him. And then also in the area of accuracy, I think that's really where you're going to see those PFF grades start to shoot up like they did in the second half.
Yeah. All right, more Trevor in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. You can get some good tickets for some of these AFC South matchups. Colts home opener, Texans game, that's going to be a doozy of a game. It's a good Packers schedule. It's a fun Packers schedule. So go get yourself some tickets at Game Time. And you can save up to 60% if you buy last minute. You're probably not going to do that for the Packers, but they have tickets for the sports, for concerts, for comedy, theater, and a lot more. Plus, all-in prices lets you see the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Plus, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. We'll get back at it with Trevor in just a second. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories in sports without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yeah, Geno Smith is an interesting comparison point too, because there was a stretch of time where you were going, okay, like maybe the Geno Smith contract is the contract that Jordan Love, it makes sense for him. And then all of a sudden at the end of the season, he goes into Dallas and just like bull rushes that team, plays great for 3 quarters against San Francisco. And then interestingly, one of the throws, that first interception, he kind of tried to dart one on a check down to a tight end, missed him on the backside. It turns into a tip and interception. Like if he just floats that out to his tight end, maybe the whole season ends up differently. Maybe they're in the NFC Championship game, maybe in the Super Bowl. Who knows? But that's a good transition point for us too, because in the draft, I remember Jaden Daniels, there was this conversation, like what changed for him? And if you ask the LSU coaches, they'll say, well, we just had to get him to trust what he was seeing. He could see it. He said, just let it rip. And I was like, that was Jordan Love. That was what Matt LaFleur was telling us about Jordan Love. You know where to go. Trust yourself and just let it rip. And I think we underestimate how important confidence is for all of these guys. We think about them as these alpha types, but confidence is still such an important part of all of this. Let's use that as a transition to the draft here. Top line, the Packers draft. What did you think of their approach?
You know, so it felt like a very Packers draft where it was like they had sort of their team needs, and not that they like pigeonholed themselves. I don't think Gutekunst necessarily does that, but it's like they have a handful of needs, or they look at the draft and they say, okay, these are a handful of positions that we really want to hit on, whether it's because they think the draft is strongest here, or whether it's they feel like their roster is weakest, and they go, we're hammering it home. Like this is absolutely like what we're doing. This is how we're getting better. Like the 2 linebackers, the 3 safeties, like it's just, you could very much tell, okay, this is where they wanted to get better. I mean, I think they drafted 3 offensive linemen as well. So it was like, if you went into the draft and you said, what are the Packers' biggest need? You go, okay, they could address secondary. They could address linebacker, maybe something on the offensive line. Well, it was just like, they just hammered those needs hard. So, you know, for it being, for the scope of the players that they picked being a little bit more narrow for Green Bay, I think they did a pretty good job. I like all the players that they brought in. You know, I am surprised that they picked Jordan Morgan over Graham Barton at the very top. I'm going to be honest with you. But you and I have talked about this before on this very show. They must just have wanted more tackle versatility with whatever that pick was, because if they're going to stick Jordan Morgan inside for like most of his career in Green Bay, then I'm going to sit here and I'm going to have to say, okay, well, why didn't you pick Graham Barton? Because I think Graham Barton's going to be the better interior offensive lineman of the 2. But if you really wanted that guard tackle flexibility, maybe they say to themselves, well, we like Morgan better as a tackle at the NFL level, or at least to be able to survive out there. So maybe that's why you go with that approach. If it is, I can't necessarily hate the logic, because you're just going with what you believe in a guy there. Javon Bullard's one of my favorite players in this class, so I absolutely love that selection. Edgerrin Cooper gives you a ton of speed, obviously, with him and Quay Walker sitting there in the middle. I think that's a lot of athleticism there at the second level. The reason why you do something like that is because you give yourself more flexibility to say, you know, whether it's an odd front or an even front in front of these guys, whether we're in nickel or we're in base, we feel very confident with these 2 linebackers being able to get sideline to sideline one way or the other. So we can put more defensive backs on the field if we want to. We can get a little bit lighter up front if we want to, because we think these guys can really crash down, get into their run fits, all that kinds of good stuff. I like Marshawn Lloyd as well. I think Lloyd is a really nice player who I think could back up Josh Jacobs now. You know, I know that they brought back A.J. Dillon, but I think that Marshawn Lloyd is going to be the spell back in that system. I think he's going to be the number 2 back when it's all said and done. Then, of course, I think you got a lot of versatility at safety with Evan Williams, and then with Kitana Oladapo as well. So I thought it was a very like Packers draft because of the narrow scope that they just really attack these certain positions. But it is a bunch of guys that I could see contributing for them either as starters or depth players.
Yeah, I want to drill down into the Edgerrin Cooper thing a little bit more because he was a little bit of a polarizing prospect, just in that there were some people that thought, hey, like mid first round, like this guy is that good. And you talk, there were some NFL scouts that you talked to, and they would say, yeah, like if we're just talking about dudes, like top 10, top 15 kind of player, but linebacker, just like not as important a position. And I think that's a compelling argument, right? Like linebacker is just, it's a different kind of thing.
Right.
You can also see the vision, right? Like why are the 49ers defense so good? Because Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner fly around. Why is the Jets defense so good? Because you have Quincy Williams and CJ Mosley who fly around. And the problem that they had in Houston was they didn't have linebackers who could fly around to really run that system there. When you were looking at Cooper, this was also, speaking of tales of halves, first half, second half, like second half, they unleashed him. Mm-hmm. And so when you were evaluating him, like what did you see? What stands out to you?
So I saw Cooper. I wasn't one of those people that was extremely high on Cooper. Now I had him ranked 59th overall on my big board. I mean, he gets picked 45th. It's not that big of a difference. So I mean, like it's fine to me.
Second round, like it's
right. And that's kind of the thing. Is like, you know, they're second round types of players. So I think the value was fine. I didn't have a problem with it. There were some people who had Cooper as like, you know, like you said, like a top 20 player.
Yeah, Daniel Jeremiah did.
Yeah, and so obviously, like when you watch Cooper, especially when they were really just letting him say, like, "Hey, the light is green. Like the light is green for you at all times. Click and close. Whenever you see the ball, go get it." I mean, this guy's ability to put his foot in the ground and get downhill, incredibly impressive. I mean, both him and Javon Bullard, I think, really improve just the potential run fits that you have and being able to make plays in the backfield because of what Bullard can do as a slot defender and then what Cooper can do as somebody who could really get upfield, whether it's between the tackles, between the guard and the center, or even off the edge and even getting to the sideline. Like he had an elite coverage grade at PFF, but I will say
a lot of like 4 times a game.
What'd you say?
He was in actual coverage like 4 times a game.
And that's the word actual has to go in it because, you know, like it's hard to differentiate because technically if this is a pass play and your assignment is the running back in the flat, well, then technically if they dump it off to that running back and you click and close real quick and get a tackle like at the line of scrimmage, that's like a good coverage play, right? I mean, like the guy caught it. He really didn't get much yards after that. You brought him down. Like that's pretty good coverage for you given the assignment that you had. So you're going to get a plus coverage grade. That's not necessarily like you said, the 49ers, you know, Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner, we're dropping you back into coverage kind of a thing. So I think when people were quoting Cooper's coverage grade at PFF, they weren't really taking the full context into account. But that does, I mean, if you, and I'm sure the Packers were able to do that in their scouting process of him. If you just look at what he does well and you keep things in front of him, again, I think that this is a guy who is really impactful, and the speed and athleticism of him allows you to get away with less linebackers on the field, which I think is plus in a lot of other ways when it comes to scheming up defense and again, how many secondary guys you can get out there for counters against the passing game.
Yeah. All right, still more to come with Trevor here on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. It's winner take all in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. The Celtics, they are minus odds to win the title, which means I like the Timberwolves. Almost 3-1 you can get on them to win the title, and they are the favorites to come out of the Western Conference. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. What I've been telling you to do is to go and find that bet, minus odds, hit it, get that $5, get those bonus bets, and then go bet on the Packers over 9.5, because right now on FanDuel, it's minus 134, so you have to pay the juice, but they are going over 9.5. I'm telling you that right now. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We'll finish up with Trevor in just a second. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app.
I think the question for him is going to be, is in a weird way, even though he's an athletic marvel, is ceiling, because if you just let him do the Devin White rookie year, like 2020 Devin White thing, I think he can look like Devin White did in 2020.
Right.
But what we saw was that there was a ceiling to that, and he
Correct.
never seemed to improve anywhere else to where you're going, okay, in coverage, his instincts are really good. And he never brought those athletic tools to bear in that sort of way. And it's like, how do you project that then when you didn't see them do it? This is why this is so difficult. This is why evaluation is so difficult, because like there were times literally, and I'm sure you remember this, like he would walk into his pedal because he just like, they didn't really need him to drop. They're just like, yeah, just take like 3 steps behind you and then just sit there and then go tackle somebody.
Right. No, and I think the Devin White style comp is a good one. And it's one that I talked about with Edger and Cooper as we kind of went on throughout the scouting process is, White was always overdrafted at 5. Like always, like even after the 2020 Super Bowl run season, when I saw him, I would have still told you, like, obviously it all worked out. They won a Super Bowl. It's hard to argue that.
He killed the Packers.
The value though of what he was as a linebacker at number 5 was always overdrafted. And I think we see that now where Tampa lets his entire contract play out, and he just signed a 1-year deal with Philadelphia because it's like, okay, well, much more often you are going to get the other version of Devin White than you are the Super Bowl run, the postseason run version of Devin White. So with Cooper, I think that you have to look at it like, yeah, if he becomes more in coverage, then all of a sudden picking him at 45, you probably got a steal. But it's also hard to look at his athleticism and his production as a downhill linebacker and think that at the very least, it was a good bet around 45, right? I mean, like, I don't think that Cooper's going to be a player who's just going to miserably fail in the league. Like, at very worst, I think he is a really athletic, again, downhill backer. And if you told me that Devin White got picked at pick number 45, well, it's a completely different viewpoint of the player overall. If Devin White gets picked at pick number 45 and has the 2020 postseason run that he has, and then obviously the exact same career, we probably look at him and he's probably back in Tampa, honestly. Like he probably gets a more realistic contract. But the fact of the matter was he went number 5 overall. He had that incredible run. And then I think he and his camp thought that he was going to sign a Roquan Smith deal. And when the Bucs were nowhere close to that, that's when it's like, okay, well, now I'm hitting free agency. Oh, no other team is going to give me that either. So now I'm signing a 1-year deal. Again, if he would have been picked more appropriately in the second round, kind of like where Cooper was, I think it's like the phrase, you under promise, you over deliver. Yeah. And that's kind of like the way that I look at Edger and Cooper right now is him being picked at 45. I go, all right, it's a good pick. And now he has the opportunity to, I think, outplay that. So we'll see.
Where do you think Javon Bullard's best spot is in the NFL?
In the slot. Like I think it is as a slot defender. I liked him at safety. I think he's fine at safety, but very clearly his best trait is just when he can be physical. He loves to tackle. He loves to be fearless against wide receivers. He likes to be physical with guys at the line of scrimmage, and he likes to fit the run. I mean, you don't get on the field at Georgia if you're a true sophomore in the middle of those 2 national championship defenses unless you absolutely are to a T doing what you're supposed to do. And Bullard did. He never shied away from physicality. He was always trying to get up in people's grill. Like I love him in the slot because of how fierce of a defender that he can be,
and he can cover,
and how willing he is in run defense. But you're right, he absolutely can't cover. Now he's not like the quickest slot corner. So yeah, here's the thing: there's going to be a couple of reps where he's going to get beat. And you're just going to have to live with it because of the rest of what he does really well for you. What you don't want to do, I don't think, is say, all right, well, he's getting beat a couple of times in the slot. We've got to move him back to the safety spot, because then at that point, I don't think he's a supernatural deep safety defender. No. So then you're basically making sure that you have to play in 2 high safety shells because the other safety's got to be covering half the field while he covers the other half. And it's just, it's, if you put him at safety, to me, it's more scheme limiting. where if you just live with maybe a couple of the reps that he might lose in the slot, you're a lot more scheme versatile because of, again, how he can fit the run as a slot defender.
Yeah, some of my favorite reps of his, like he didn't even really make plays, but they would disguise with him. He would line up in the slot and they'd bring the deep safety down and get him back. And it was like it was a little cat and mouse game. And I was like, that's cool. That seems interesting. That seems like NFL stuff that they're doing. And it was interesting. Devontae Wyatt, I think it was, when he came to Green Bay, he was like, our defense at Georgia was more complicated than NFL defense. Like it is kind of crazy that is the truth, but that's the truth. Like they're doing some really, you watch the defense. Like if you want to get dirty about scheme, what that defense does on a regular basis is really, really cool. What Kirby Smart is able to do with these college players is really crazy. All right, last thing here from a macro standpoint, now that we've seen, okay, the offseason, Xavier McKinney, Josh Jacobs, the Aaron Jones exchange, and then now the draft, understanding too what's going on in the rest of the NFC. What do you think of their offseason, and where do you think they stand right now in the NFC?
Yeah, I thought it was a good season for them. I was sort of shocked, like everything that was happening with their running backs, like when free agency kind of like popped off, right? I was like,
crazy.
Whoa, hold on, what's going on? But I mean, now when the dust settled, you go, oh, okay, like this isn't really so bad. Look, as long as the offensive line holds up the way they want it to, whatever combination of their best five is. Again, we talked at the beginning of the podcast how excited I am about Jordan Love. Josh Jacobs is, to me, basically a version of Aaron Jones, who's just 3 years younger, right? So I think that it's kind of like a one in, one out. I like Marshawn Lloyd now as a part of this team. It's another year for these young receivers and these young tight ends to get better. There's a lot of investment of high draft picks on the defensive side of the football. Obviously, a couple of them just have to play a little bit better. Stay healthy, I think, is a big point for this team. But I like the Xavier McKinney ad. I like the Javon Bullard ad, like I said. I think that gives him a ton of flexibility there. And then I think, the front seven's kind of already set at this point with the guys that they already have. So just need to continue to play well at that level. And look, Green Bay was obviously a playoff caliber team last year. They're a playoff caliber team this year, right? I don't know if anybody's catching Detroit, because I love Detroit's offseason, and I felt like they brought back a lot of what they loved. They re-signed a lot of guys, so they're not having to worry about a lot of that going into the training camp. I think they had a really good free agency period. I think they had a really good draft as well. So I still think Detroit's the favorites for that division, but Green Bay, absolutely, in my opinion, should be next in line, and they should be pretty odds-on favorites to win one of those wild card spots and get back to the postseason.
Okay, I know I said last question, but I did mean to ask you about this because I saw you. I believe they were your grades, the offseason grades, and you gave Detroit an A+. And I thought that was interesting because I thought there were three spots where I felt they really needed to improve: corner, a secondary pass catcher, and a secondary pass rusher. They definitely poured resources into corner. They didn't at receiver, and they didn't in terms of pass rush. So I'm a little surprised that you thought that you're as excited. Like, I know DJ Reader, a good player. I like that signing. But like, I'm surprised that you were as high on the Lions offseason as you are.
When I look at the Lions, and I don't necessarily disagree, because I think that the receiver room overall could be better. But like, Amon-Ra St. Brown is a wide receiver one at the NFL. Yeah. We've seen just like insane production for him. Sam Laporta, to me, can become like a wide receiver too, basically, for how much they used him and how talented he is. I then add on top of that, like, I think we're in for a big year for Jameson Williams. I really,
you got to show me 24 catches last year, Trevor.
And look, you are completely right. But when I look at this team, the fact that he
had 2 more touchdowns than you and I.
Corner, they did. That's very true. That's very true. I was close. Obviously, I was very close. I was right there.
We did our best.
When I looked at their needs, I wouldn't have said that they were all equal. I would have said that corner was bigger, and they threw a lot of resources at corner, right? They signed Amik Robertson. They brought back Emmanuel Mosley, which are 2 signings that I really like. They took a 3rd-round flyer on Carlton Davis, which I like again. They got aggressive to trade up for Terran Arnold. They kept their foot on the gas pedal with Ennis Rakestraw Jr., which gives them both short and long-term flexibility for the position that you could plan out. They added Marcus Davenport along the defensive line, so like that's kind of their addition there. They add DJ Reader as well, which I think is huge for them. Obviously not as a big-time pass rusher, but I think he frees up the rest of that front seven to be able to be pass rushers there as well. Because let's face it, you can't just like snap your fingers and be like, okay, well, we have these needs. We might have money. Like, let's just fill them with a good player. Well, if the player's not there, if the situation's not there, it's sort of tough to do that. Could they have taken other swings of the bat at some other pass rushers like a Danielle Hunter or Jonathan Grenard or something like that? Like, yeah, they probably could have, but I still, the corner was the big need for me for Detroit, and they hit it extremely hard. I already believe this younger receiving core is going to take a step up. And then the reason why I gave it the A+ is because you went into the offseason, you extended Jared Goff, you extended Penei Sewell, you extended Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah.
This team has
having really good players is good.
Nothing to think about now going into training camp. The only thing this team has to think about it going into training camp is we are winning a Super Bowl this year. That's it. Like, they handled all of their business with team building, with all that. The cards are on the table. And to me, again, for a team that's looking to get over the hump, I just thought they did a fantastic job.
Well, they better be thinking about one more thing, and that is Jordan Love in year 2, Dontavian Wicks and Jaden Reed and Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft in year 2. No, Trevor, I appreciate the time as always, man. Be good.
I appreciate it, Pete. Anytime.
All right, thanks to Trevor for joining the show. Awesome to talk to him. Much more coming this week. We've got more coming next week. We got Matty Hudek going to talk about Michael Pratt. Jason Hirschhorn going to come in to talk about a piece that he's working on, probably going to be out by the time that we have that conversation about some of the concepts that the Packers have returned to. Some staple concepts are so back. So a lot more to come. And OTAs. We're going to hear from Matt LaFleur today, the players, all that good stuff. So always something to talk about here on Locked On Packers. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Find it anywhere on any of the socials. Locked On Packers on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube. Go subscribe on all the platforms. And I am re-upping my request. Subtext, I have big plans for Subtext this year. Become an insider. And you will have even more access to me, conversations that we will have, halftime adjustments, pregame, postgame, all sorts of exclusive content. I have the tweet pinned, so you can go and do that. So become an insider and get exclusive content delivered right to your phone, in line right to me. Seriously. So you can stay locked on Packers.